Hello, little people. It's time for another Oz History, the interesting bits. Today we tell the story of Zed's Special Unit and their daring raid, Operation Jaywick. One of the problems about the way I was taught Australia's past as a young cartoon character was the way they explained our war history. I grew up in a time when the threat of nuclear war was still a thing, and our teachers at cartoon school didn't want to glorify anything that sounded too violent. This is because they were hippies. Filthy hippies who wanted us young and impressionable cartoon characters to star in avant-garde claymation epics for public broadcasters. Either that or drug-fueled multi-transformation acid trip yellow submarine knockoffs. Well, I went commercial, you bastards, and I'm glad of it. Look at me now. Who's the rich one? And I never had to transform myself into a dove or work with some sort of weird turtleneck Scandinavian director with a Play-Doh fetish. So anyway, when we learned Australian military history, it was all focused in on the whole man's inhumanity to man stuff. We were taught about the strategic defeat at Gallipoli and the fighting retreat at Kokoda. And these topics were worth learning, of course, but we never got taught other times the Aussies went on the attack and beat the snot out of the enemy. Like when the veterans of Gallipoli went on to break the stalemate on the Western Front with victory at Hamel. Or the fact that after the withdrawal at Kokoda, the Australians counterattacked and won some of the first victories over the Japanese army in the whole war. So, in that spirit of badass Australians doing badass things in times of war, I present to you this tale of Australia's first elite commando unit and their most successful and daring raid. When World War II started, Australia figured it needed a unit to do all the sneaky stuff of war, like reconnaissance and spying and things. Duly, Zed's Special Unit was created. They were helped, indirectly, by the fall of Singapore. As the Japanese marched in, a bunch of British spies snuck out and found their way here. One of the men who found his way here was this man, Ivan Lyon. He was an English soldier and a spy who worked with local Singaporean resistance when the Japanese came. He also helped get civilians to safety. Through doing this, he met an Australian named Bill Reynolds. Bill also worked to rescue evacuees from the invading Japanese. He could do this because he captained a captured Japanese fishing boat called the Kafukumaru, and so he could slip by patrols. Ivan and Bill hatched a daring plan. When Ivan Lyon got to Australia, he joined the newly formed Z Force and put the daring plan into action. And that daring plan was to take Bill's Japanese fishing boat and use it against said Japanese. Now remember, in this point in the war, there was a real concern Japan would invade. Pretty much as soon as Japan had overrun Singapore, they launched a bombing raid on Darwin. If they could do that, maybe they could invade the whole country. And if they invaded, all of us cartoon characters would probably be working in anime, being either manic, or with really wide eyes, or probably avoiding all of those suggestive tentacles. Anyway, Bill Reynolds went off to spy for America, while Ivan Lyon gathered the toughest Z-Force soldiers he could. Their job would be to sail the Japanese fishing boat, now renamed the Crate, to Singapore, break out some canoes to silently row to Singapore Harbour, then use some explosive charges to blow up some ships. Sounds easy, till you realise that from where the ship took off in Oz, it was almost 3,000 kilometres to their target, and this made it the longest raid behind enemy lines in modern military history. Add to this, they were a bunch of white Australian guys in Southeast Asia, so probably would stick out just a little bit. And add to that, when they got to the canoeing/kaboomy part of the proceedings, they would have to do it at night. And if anything went wrong, they would all be shot. Understandably, the folk who ran the Z-Force wanted to test a few things, so they organised a dry run in Townsville. In June 1943, a group of Z-Force guys paddled into the tightly secured harbour, attached dummy mines to some merchant vessels, paddled away unseen, and then went to sleep. A sleep they were rudely awakened from when various naval types arrested them for trying to mine their ships. So the plan was sound, and on August 1943, the crew of that renamed fishing boat, the MV Crate, set sail. One of the first things they did was to dye their skin. They had to look like Southeast Asians, and none of them did, obviously. Side note, given Zedfosk's task of spying in Asia, they were one of the first multicultural outfits in the service, at a time when Australia's immigration policy was a little bit scumbaggy. So they made their way to an island called Panjang, which they figured would be safe enough to assemble their canoes, generally hide out and prepare for the last leg, a 1,000-kilometer paddle to Singapore. Then the crate went one way and the guys in the canoes went the other, with the plan to rendezvous in a few days' time, assuming they didn't get shot. Ivan Lyon, who would go in one of the canoes, told the guys staying on board the crate that if they weren't back in time, to leave without them. So they rowed into Singapore in the darkness, and one night they silently attached 9 magnetic mines to 7 ships in Singapore harbour, and slipped out again. In the morning, things went kaboomy, as the Z-Force guys quietly paddled away. They met up with the crate a few days later. The return trip was just about as uneventful as the trip out. The one tense moment was when a Japanese patrol boat got close, but their disguises were good enough that it didn't bother to investigate. In fact, the raid went so well that the Japanese literally never knew what hit them. Well, they literally did a few decades later, but at the time, it was literal. They blamed the local Chinese Singaporean resistance, and their reprisals were very harsh. Was it worth it in the end? Japan didn't know it was us, and the local Chinese paid a terrible price. It's out of my pay grade as a mere highly paid cartoon character to judge. But I do think the fact that our country can produce people willing to canoe explosives thousands of kilometers behind enemy lines in the middle of the night, that's valuable in itself. And it's something that we should be proud of.